Study found that Florida pensions would have earned $1 billion more between 1988 and 2011 if they had not invested in private equity. And that, quote, private equity profitability has been in year-over-year decline for the past 20 years. That's the market Trump will benevolently open up to everyday investors if he goes forward with the reported executive order. But it's not just Trump that those private equity lobbyists have gotten to. Last week, the House passed the Equal Opportunity for All Investors Act in a unanimous bipartisan vote. The bill was introduced by Nebraska Republican Mike Flood and co-sponsored by Republican Mike Lawler of New York, as well as Democrats Cleo Fields, Sri Thanadar, and Sarah McBride. The bill instructs the SEC to come up with an investment accreditation exam that would allow anyone who can pass the exam to be able to invest in private equity and other asset classes typically restricted based on income or wealth level. The idea, again, is that democratizing the investment industry, allowing anyone who can prove sufficient knowledge to become an accredited investor, which is required in order to invest in private equity. According to reporting from Sludge, Representative Sarah McBride called the bill a common-sense bipartisan step to expand opportunities for women, veterans, and communities of color. The bill has been endorsed by the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, a major trade group representing broker-dealers, investment banks, and asset managers that stand to benefit from an expanded pool of eligible investors. Once again, it's being sold as simply a common-sense move to compromise with the securities industry that definitely also just wants women, veterans, and communities of color to benefit. Sludge goes on to report, quote, opponents like Americans for Financial Reform argue that private markets are fundamentally tilted in favor of wealthy, well-connected insiders. In their view, these markets lack transparency, carry high risks, and allow issuers to selectively share information. Elite investors get better terms, pricing, and access, while ordinary investors are left exposed and uninformed. They warn that this kind of deregulation has a long history of benefiting insiders while leaving retail investors to bear the fallout. More proof that this is a wolf in sheep's clothing, the CEO of BlackRock is chomping at the bit to offer private equity investment to the masses. According to reporting from Financial Advisor magazine back in May, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, quote, argued in his latest annual letter to shareholders that ordinary investors would be better diversified with private assets. He also complained that excluding them from private investments thus far has widened wealth inequality, as rich investors became even richer buying fast-growing, tech-driven private businesses. The article goes on to say, quote, Fink isn't wrong, but he neglects to mention that much of the wealth from private equity was made when the industry was small and the opportunities were plentiful, beginning in the 1980s through the 2000s. Now it's just the opposite. He also leaves out that the top quartile of private equity investors took home most of the profits in that period, leaving other PE investors no better off than they would have been in stocks, and many of them worse off. Ordinary investors are decades late to the private asset party. The investor-friendly move would have been to give everyone access to private markets from the start. Instead, they're attempting to jump ship and pass the shitty investments on to us, selling us to put our pocket change into private equity. I would argue that a lot of investors shouldn't go anywhere near this, certified financial planner Catherine Valega told CNBC. Probably 95% of the country doesn't even have an emergency savings fund. And now you're going to tell them if they're smart enough, they can invest in private securities? That does not make sense to me. And Ben Schifrin, director of securities policy at nonprofit Better Markets, told the Wall Street Journal that opening up 401ks won't necessarily level the playing field. One of my biggest worries is you're still going to have the institutional investors get the best offerings, and your retail investor is going to be left with the leftovers. It genuinely doesn't make sense at a time when pensions are suffering and we have zero faith in the existence of Social Security to support us in our retirement, that everyday Americans should be investing their retirement savings in underregulated, opaque, often risky investments, especially considering the entire private equity industry is chomping at the bit for us to do so. They don't have our best interests at heart. They don't care whether any of us lives or dies. They just want cash to inject into their failing businesses. And the tax breaks that we're giving them, the ruin to our communities and our jobs, that's not enough. They're trying to take us for everything we're worth. And under Trump and this useless Congress that they've bought out over years, they're being given every opportunity to do so. Okay, so how to fight back?